Today, we're diving into the EU's big new rulebook, the Data Governance Act. Now, this isn't just another piece of legislation. It's a really ambitious plan to completely change the game for how we share, access, and, innovate with data all across Europe.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get into the big problem the EU is trying to tackle here. Then we'll break down the three main parts of their solution, how they plan to unlock government data, create these new trusted matchmakers, and encourage something called data altruism.
Okay, so we've all heard that phrase, right? Data is the new oil. And it's true. I mean, it has this incredible potential to do amazing things, from developing new medicines to fighting climate change. But there's a huge catch. Most of this so-called oil is basically stuck underground. It's either locked up by a few big companies, or it's just too sensitive to share.
And that right there is the core question the Data Governance Act, or the DGA for short, is trying to answer. I mean, if this stuff is so valuable, why isn't it flowing freely? What's the holdup? So you can see the two sides of the coin here, right? On one hand, you have all this amazing promise. We're talking smarter cities, huge leaps in research, and a real chance for small businesses and startups to flourish. But then you look at the reality. And the reality is a market that's pretty much paralyzed by a lack of trust, worries about giving away company secrets, and these lock-in effects, which is just a fancy way of saying a couple of giant players are hoarding all the data and nobody else can get a look in.
So what's the EU's big idea? Well, they want to build something they call a common European data space. The best way to think about it is like a single market, like we have for goods, but this one is for data. It's a space where data can move freely and safely across borders. And the DGA, that's the foundation. It's the first big building block for creating this new kind of data economy, one that's built on trust and puts people first.
All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. How is the DGA actually going to fix this mess? Well, the first big piece of the puzzle is all about public sector data. We're talking about the absolute treasure trove of information that governments are sitting on. The plan is to create a new, safe way to open up even the most sensitive parts of that data for things like research and innovation.
Now, to be clear, we're not just talking about the stuff that's already public, like census data. No, this is about the really tricky stuff. The data that's normally locked down because of commercial secrets, intellectual property, or, of course, personal privacy. The DGA creates the rulebook for what it calls reuse, basically letting researchers and companies analyze this data for totally new purposes. But, and this is absolutely crucial, it's not a free-for-all. You can't just go and download a massive, sensitive government database. No way. The Act sets up a really strict, controlled process. It goes like this. A researcher asks for access. The public body checks them out thoroughly. And only if they get the green light, they get access inside a super secure digital room, a secure processing environment, where the government can watch over everything to make sure the data stays safe. And the safeguards they've built in are, well, pretty intense. The focus on safety is just relentless. For one, any personal data has to be fully anonymized. Any commercial secrets have to be hidden or modified. The people using the data are legally banned from even trying to figure out who is who. And maybe one of the most important parts, no exclusive deals. This is about fair access for everyone, not just giving one big company a special key. Okay, on to the second pillar. And this one is really interesting because it literally creates a brand new type of business in Europe. To fix that giant trust issue between people and companies, the DGCA sets up a regulated system for what you could call data matchmakers or trusted go-betweens. So what are these things? Basically, they're neutral third parties. Their one and only job is to connect the dots, to connect a data holder, which could be you or a business, with a data user who needs that data. Think of them like a data notary or a completely neutral marketplace. The most important rule: they are not allowed to touch the data themselves or use it for any other reason. They just make the connection. And the EU is pretty proud of this idea. The regulation itself calls it a novel European way of doing things. And the whole point is to create this new neutral layer in the data economy. By splitting up the job of sharing data from the job of using data, the hope is to finally break up those massive data silos that a few big tech companies control and, make the whole market a bit fairer. And believe me, the rulebook for these intermediaries is strict. For starters, they have to be a completely separate company from anything else they do, just to avoid any conflicts of interest. They actually have what's called a fiduciary duty, a legal obligation to act in the best interests of the people whose data they're handling. Everything has to be fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory.
You can see how this is all about one thing, building the trust that's just not there right now. All right, let's move on to the third and final pillar. And this one, well, this one is maybe the most forward-thinking part of the whole thing. It creates an official framework for data altruism. Basically, donating your data for a good cause. And yeah, data altruism is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's about you or your company voluntarily sharing data for the common good. We're talking about things like scientific research, improving healthcare, or fighting climate change. And you do it without wanting any reward, just to help out. So how does this work in practice? Well, the DGA creates these officially recognized data altruism organizations. To get on the list, they have to be nonprofits and meet some really high standards for transparency and security. They'll be the ones managing the whole process, and they have to make it super simple for you to give your consent and just as simple to take it back whenever you want. The big picture here is to create these huge, trusted pools of data that researchers can use to tackle some of our biggest problems. Okay, so let's take a step back. We've got our 3 pillars, right? Unlocking public data, creating these neutral data matchmakers, and setting up a system for data donation. So how does this all fit together? How does it get us to that big European data market? Well, this is a pretty good way to see it. Each pillar tackles a different piece of the puzzle. For public data, the magic ingredient is those secure processing environments. For business-to-business or consumer-to-business sharing, it's all about those neutral third parties. And for data for the public good, it's the registered nonprofits. See? 3 different tools, but they're all working towards the exact same goal: to get more data flowing, but to do it safely and with trust. And when you boil it all down, what's the ultimate goal? It's to completely change the rules of the game. The aim is to move away from a market where the winner is just the company that's hoarded the most data. Instead, they want a market where the winner is the company with the best idea. It's about leveling the playing field so that startups and smaller businesses have a real shot, and about giving you and me more control over our own data. Which, of course, leaves us with the million-dollar question: can Europe actually pull this off? Can it build a data economy that's based on trust, not just on control? Because that's what this is, really. The Data Governance Act is more than just a law. It's a bold, uniquely European experiment. It's a bet that an economy built on values like trust and fairness can actually be more innovative than one built on just hoarding and control. And only time will tell if that bet is going to pay off.